Hey y'all, this is Brown at I have Brown, and tonight we're going to be talking about Conan the Barbarian on DVD. So, just to clear up some confusion, I'm actually holding Conan the Complete Quest, and it has two movies on one disc. One side has Conan the Barbarian with several bonus features, and the other side has Conan the Destroyer with a theatrical trailer. So, for the purpose of this review, I'm going to be focusing exclusively on Conan the Barbarian. And also, I apologize in advance if my voice sounds kind of funny. I recently got over a bug, so there you go. But Conan the Barbarian was made in 1982 and was based on the immensely popular pulp fantasy character created by Robert E. Howard. And Robert E. Howard was a born and raised Texas writer who gave us characters such as Bryn McMorn, Solomon Kane, and Cole of Atlantis. But Conan the Barbarian was by and far his most popular creation. And also, he happened to be pen pals with writers such as H.P. Lovecraft and August Derleth. So he definitely knew some people, and he also had a decent following. Considering that this was in the time of pulp stories, and that was predominantly what he worked with. But sadly, though, he took his life at the age of 30, shortly after his mother became terminally ill from tuberculosis. And so what we had was a writer who was very talented, but who had a sad ending. But like a lot of other artists, his work outlived him, and his greatest popularity came after he died. But after his passing, several other writers took a shot at writing Conan the Barbarian, and so you had this character continue to be developed in short stories, novellas, and full-on novels. And then you fast forward to the 70s, and Marvel Comics gave the character his own comic book series. And so by the time that the movie came around in 1982, there was a lot of lore to tap from for inspiration. I mean, you had books and comic books. But the director of the movie was a gentleman named John Milius, who is regarded in some circles as a bit of a right-wing renegade, but as best, though, he tends to craft stories that deal with masculine protagonists who basically grow from being boys to men. They go on these journeys to adulthood, both, I guess you could say, in a literal sense and in a metaphorical sense, through going through dealing with adversity. And you have movies such as, say, the surfing movie, The Big Wednesday, which had Jan Michael Vincent, Gary Busey, and William Catt. And then you had, of course, Conan the Barbarian. And then you had, the movie Red Dawn, which a lot of people consider his most popular movie. And I gotta give a shout out to Coach Urban from 11th grade. He was our American history teacher. And when he got to the part in American history that dealt with the 80s, he was like, hey class, we're going to spend a couple of days watching this movie. And so it's like, hey, it's actually pretty fun, so good memories, right? So thanks, Coach Urban. But yeah, so John Milius, though, those were arguably his three best well-known movies. But he also did the movies Dillinger and The Wind and the Lion. I haven't seen those two, but they're well regarded by movie fans as well. So but with Conan the Barbarian, though, I mean, he had this the whole notion of a character growing from a boy to a man after having gone through adversity. I mean, it was ideal for a fantasy setting, because I mean, you had a setting that took place in a believable a believable depiction of a bygone time period, but with some fantastical elements. And so when you see the character of Conan as played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, going on this journey to being a man, so to speak, I mean, it's an epic journey. It really is. And so John Milius, though, he co-wrote the screenplay with Oliver Stone, of all people. And same guy who gave us Salvador, Platoon, Wall Street, and JFK. And usually when people think of Oliver Stone, they think of, political movies or conspiracy theories and what have you. But he was also, a very good screenwriter as well. I mean, he gave us the screenplays for Midnight Express, Scarface, and Year of the Dragon, but also the original screenplay for this movie. Now, bear in mind, his original screenplay was much more epic in tone, in a sense that there are all sorts of mutants and monsters and other crazy elements. But when John Milius, came on and rewrote the screenplay, he left some of Oliver Stone's stuff in, but he trimmed a lot of it down to where you had a stripped down movie that was more, I guess you could say, palpable to a mainstream audience. So, whereas Oliver Stone's movie, I think, from what I've read about it, would have been more, it would have been more epic for sure, but it would have been more limited in its appeal, like to a niche audience. Whereas when John Milius, rewrote the screenplay, he made it to where, the fantastical elements were played down immensely, but at the same time, though, there was a more of an appeal to, the everyman. And so, you didn't have to necessarily be a fantasy, fan to appreciate this movie. It's just, it has like this cross-cultural appeal, I guess you could say, from a genre standpoint. But I think that was ultimately the better choice, because what you have here is a movie that, while yes, the door is open for a sequel, and that was the initial goal, was to hopefully create, a series of movies. It works very well as a standalone movie, and a lot of people to this day, are fond of this movie and some people are even influenced by it in the realms of art. So there you go. You have a classic, fantasy movie from the 80s, and it's just an all-around good movie. So let's go ahead and get into it. So, the movie starts off, when Conan is a child, and, his family and village are wiped out by, the armies of the warlord Thulsa Doom, who is basically scouring the world for, natural resources, or just resources in general. And in this case, he's looking for steel. And in the village, the villagers, they, try to put up a fight, and they even manage to kill some of, Thulsa Doom's, soldiers. But unfortunately, they are entirely wiped out, with the exception of the children. And so Conan, along with all the other children, find themselves in slavery. And so Conan, goes from being a child to a teenager, until finally, he's a young man who spent most of his life in slavery, until one day he's taken by a gladiator owner, or a man who works with gladiators and has a stake in arena fighting. And so Conan soon finds that he has a natural aptitude for physical violence. And so in these fights to the death and these arena battles, he soon makes a name for himself and makes his new owner very wealthy. And his reputation allows him to have the luxuries of, learning to read and write, getting instruction from, sword experts, so his fighting, style and his skills will be, further improved upon. And he's also bred to the finest stock when it comes to the fairer sex. So being a champion gladiator definitely has its perks for Conan. But one day, though, his owner frees him. In the words of the narrator, may perhaps the owner, saw Conan as a wild animal who could no longer be caged. And so, Conan makes his way into the world, and after having, found a sword in this ancient tomb, he's now armed and free to, choose his own path. And even though this was his first taste of freedom since he was a child, he can't bring himself to forget about what happened to his family and his village. And he asks people that he meets, what can you tell me about Thulsa Doom, or what can you tell me about this symbol of two snakes coming together. And so he eventually finds this beautiful woman who it turns out is a shape-shifting witch who nearly kills him. But in the process, though, he learns from her that Thulsa Doom is in a place called Zemara. And shortly after this frightful encounter, Conan finds this thief who's nearly starved to death, a thief named Subotai. And after having rescued the guy, the two of them end up becoming good friends. And this is probably the first real friend Conan's had since he was a child. And so the two of them, they go on this journey together, and and Subotai is just grateful to be alive and and rescued, right? And so basically, he's got Conan's back, and Conan's just grateful to have a friend again, for a first time, So in years, right? So anyway, though, the two of them, they make it to this city. And as they're continuing to ask around about Thulsa Doom and the symbol of the snake and everything, they find out that Thulsa Doom has basically gone from warlord to cult leader, because just about every civilized city that they're aware of, it turns out actually has a religious sect belonging to Thulsa Doom. And it's at this one particular building that they direct their attention to, or they're told to direct their attention to, because that's where his followers gather for sacrifice and other dark rites. But unfortunately, the authorities are too scared of Thulsa Doom to actually do anything about it. So one particular night, Conan and Subotai, they decide to sneak into this building, into this tower, and to see what kind of treasure they can steal. And in the process, they meet a fellow thief named Valeria, who's actually done a much better job of studying, the security measures and the entry points and the exit points of the tower. And so the three of them join forces, to sneak into the tower. And while they certainly steal, quite a bit of jewels, they also run afoul of this giant snake that's in the sacrificial pit, and through a combined effort of Subotai's archery and Conan's swordsmanship, the snake is torn apart, and it's shortly after that they're discovered, and the three of them are able to hightail it out of there with their newfound wealth. But unfortunately, though, while on one hand, I mean, there's some good and some bad that comes from their new fortune. While celebrating, Conan and Valeria end up becoming lovers, and but unfortunately, shortly after that, the three of them are captured by the city guard that works for the king of the city, one King Osric. And Osric makes them an offer. Basically, he'll give them as much wealth as they can carry, if they rescue his daughter from the clutches of Thulsa Doom. And the reason he wants them to do it is because by having raided Thulsa Doom's tower in his city, they've basically taken a stand against Thulsa Doom, something that everyone else is too afraid to do. And so he chose them for this rescue mission because his daughter has fallen under the sway of Thulsa Doom and has gone off to be his slave or concubine. And he's frankly concerned that Thulsa Doom is going to convince her through hypnosis or just powerful persuasion to come back to her father only to kill him. And so he's hoping that they'll be able to rescue her before Thulsa Doom's grip on her is too strong. And so the three of them they discuss it, and Subotai and Valeria are wanting to go their own way, and they're just like, forget all this. Thulsa Doom, I mean, we got lucky in that tower, but Thulsa Doom is something else. I mean, from what we've heard, he's tapped into something evil, like demonic, right? And so they're wanting to go their separate ways, and Valeria's wanting Conan to come with them. So basically the two of them can continue to be together. But as much as Conan loves her, and as much of a friend as he considered Subotai, he can't bring himself to forget his need for vengeance against Thulsa Doom. And so basically he ends up going his own way to go after Thulsa Doom. And in the process, along the way, he meets this wizard who becomes a friend of his, and tells him what he can about Thulsa Doom, and also just about the gods in general. But Conan, of course, I mean, he takes all this in stride, and continues to go on his way, to find Thulsa Doom. And he eventually does find Thulsa Doom, but in the process, nearly gets killed. And it's only, when his friends rescue him after having been crucified, that he's able to, become born again, so to speak, and focus on this mission of vengeance as well as rescue. But this was a really good movie, though. I mean, this was a movie that had a lot going on. I mean, on one hand, it's a fantasy movie, but on the other hand, though, it's a movie that has a very humanistic take on things, in a sense that you have these characters, namely Conan, and Subotai and Valeria, going through adversity and how it affects them. And of course, with Conan being the focus, you see someone who literally spends most of their life as a slave and a gladiator, making their way in the world, after having been given freedom, and basically learning to stand on his own 2 feet in the outside world and basically be a man. And I think that it was a combination of good writing by John Milius and Oliver Stone, as well as a good performance by Arnold Schwarzenegger, where you really saw that. You really saw him grow as a character. And basically, I mean, you have a character who is definitely a force to be reckoned with, but is also very human, in not only in the sense that he can be hurt physically, but he's also someone who has a lot of pathos to him, in a sense that he's haunted by the specter of what happened to his, family and his village when he was a child. And also, you know, the fact that, he comes to care for, his, friend Subotai and his friend slash, lover Valeria, as much as he cares for them, he can't, he can't necessarily force them to go on this journey with him. So when he tries to go it alone, I mean, on one hand, he's not wanting to endanger them, but he's also, wanting to fulfill his need of vengeance. So that way, he can ultimately see himself as a man, walking his own path and completing his destiny. And so when Thulsa Doom gets involved, though, I mean, you have this individual, played by the late, great James Earl Jones, who, has supposedly been alive for 1,000 years and has seen, empires rise and fall, and has gone from, warlord to cult leader. But he, even though, he sends Conan to his, what was supposed to be his death by way of crucifixion, he has, some parting words for Conan, in a sense that, his Conan's, father had told him about the riddle of steel when he was a child. He told Conan about how you can't trust men, you can't trust women, you can't trust beasts, but you can trust the steel in your hand. You can trust your sword. And so, Thulsa Doom, as a parting lesson, he shows Conan, that flesh is stronger than steel, and by way of hypnotizing one of his followers to, jump to their deaths. And basically they make a hole in the ground, just from jumping from a great height. And, as he's pointing out to Conan, that is strength, right? And so ironically, Conan gets another part of the puzzle from the man he hates, the man that he wants to kill. But, James Earl Jones, though, just does a wonderful job of portraying, someone who is an ancient, individual who, is evil and yet world-weary. Basically, he's seen it all, done it all, and yet finds some, strange amusement from the fact that, this young man wants to kill him for something he doesn't even remember, because it's like, he and his, henchmen, his armies, they've, murdered thousands of people, if not millions, and they've, destroyed Lord knows how many villages. And so when Conan's telling him, you killed my, family and, my people, Thulsa Doom's all like, must have been when I was younger. And basically it was like Tuesday for him, right? And so James Earl Jones just plays that in such a way to where it's like, this is an evil individual, but at the same time, I mean, he's, fascinating to watch on screen, in a sense that you see someone who has been around for so long that they take everything for granted. And so, ironically, they get this bit of amusement from, someone who's trying to kill them, to a point where they're willing to, give them a parting lesson, before sending them to their deaths. But James Earl Jones, though, I like how he plays Thulsa Doom, because the way, John Milius wrote the screenplay with Thulsa Doom, he had it to where Thulsa Doom was kind of a Jim Jones-like figure, and James Earl Jones just, takes that approach and runs with it. And so imagine someone like Jim Jones in a fantasy setting, and you have the guy who did the voice of Darth Vader playing such a character, and it's a wonderful performance. And as much as I love James Earl Jones for having given us the voice of Darth Vader, I think Thulsa Doom is one of his more nuanced characters that we see him physically play, if that makes any sense. But I also liked the actors. Give me a sec here. Gerry Lopez as Subotai, and Sandahl Bergman as Valeria. And the two of them, they play their characters very well, as Conan's fellow thieves. And I liked how they're different in terms of, say, their personalities and their philosophies. But they just play so well off of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the chemistry between the three of them is very well done. And Gerry Lopez as Subotai gets a lot of good dialogue moments with Arnold Schwarzenegger's Conan, where like at one point they're discussing their spiritual beliefs and what have you, and it's actually kind of a funny scene, but in some ways kind of thought-provoking too, and you don't expect to see something like that in a movie like this. And Subotai also ends up being able to handle himself rather well in the fight scenes, and so you get some pretty cool moments with him. And then, of course, Sandahl Bergman turns out was a classically trained dancer, and so she was able to bring this grace to her physicality whenever she's in, say, like a fight scene or something like that. But she's also someone who is able to play Valeria as an individual who basically is a force to be reckoned with as well, but has a compassionate side to them. Like there's a warm center to their tough exterior, and she's beautiful to look at as well. But it's like she's someone who can kick ass and take names, but also longs for the love that comes with say someone who will settle with you. And so basically when she and Conan become lovers, I mean, she sees that with Conan and she wants that with him. But as much as Conan loves her and cares about her, I mean, he can't bring himself to toss aside his mission for vengeance. And so there's kind of a tragic side to Valeria's character. And I thought that Sandahl Bergman did a good job, playing that, type, because I mean, you'll have moments where she's laughing in the face of danger, but then in one of the more quiet moments, she's talking with Conan about how oftentimes she'll be alone on her journeys and adventures, but she'll pass by huts where she can see the shadows of a man and a woman holding each other, but she'll just pass on by, and she'll find herself wanting sometimes to be on the other side of that. She just wants to be one of the people holding each other while someone else passes by. And it's a very touching moment of vulnerability for her character, and I thought that Sandahl Bergman did a really good job. But yeah, her and Gerry Lopez, I thought, did a really good job of playing Conan's friends. And of course, I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I mean, you do get the occasional sound, like, say, in the fight scenes and what have you, but overall, though, he does a very good job in the part. And the dialogue with his character is limited, but it's done in such a way to where you buy the fact that Conan, or at least this iteration of Conan, is a man of he's a man of few words, but when he does talk, though, you find yourself wanting to hear what he has to say. And so you have some lines of dialogue that are actually rather touching in some ways, and sometimes funny, and then other times kind of like, oh, shit's about to get real. Like, for example, when he prays to Crom in the climactic battle, I mean, or before the climactic battle, there's this epic prayer that he gives to his god Crom, and you listen to him say it in the movie, and it's like, that's something Conan would say. And also I gotta give props to the late great Mako, who played the wizard, the one who Conan befriends on his journey to Thulsa Doom, and who also becomes very instrumental in saving his life, after having been crucified. But Mako just plays this wizard guy who, he's eccentric and kind of like a bundle of nerves, right? But at the same time, is this individual? He seems touched in the head, but then you're kind of like, dude, you're pulling our leg. You're sane as the rest of us, that kind of thing. But as a wizard, though, I mean, he definitely has a unique perspective on things, and he has this sense of humor that just totally wins you over with him. And so, like, once he becomes kind of a part of the group, I mean, he even comes in handy in the climactic battle, in a way. But it's just, he's such an endearing, member of the group that, it's like you like him as a character, but also, you respect his capabilities as a sorcerer, because magic in this film, what you see on screen, it's not done very often, but when it is used, it's kind of like, that was pretty cool to see, and also kind of scary in some ways. But but Mako's part, when it comes to, say, bringing such a character to life, you get a glimpse into the realm of magic, with his character, as well as the character of Thulsa Doom. But the use of magic, though, it's subdued. But the brief moments that you do see it with Mako's character, as well as Thulsa Doom's character, it makes an impression, though. Especially in the scene where, that he has to perform this ritual in order to save the life of Conan, who is very near death. And basically, you see some very good, pre-CGI special effects, and when you see the types of forces that this character taps into, you're kind of like, yeah, magic's a real thing in this world, but it's enough that it even scares him, even though he's opening the door for it. So it's something that you don't take lightly as far as the whole concept of magic goes. But I liked how they had his character, and how his character sort of opened that door, and showed the audience how magic can be used in here. But so he had like light and dark with Thulsa, light with his character and dark with the character of Thulsa Doom in terms of how magic was depicted. I mean, both subdued uses of magic, but nonetheless memorable. Also, I just wanted to kind of give props to see, these are bit players, right? But you have William Smith, who played Conan's father, and it's a brief performance, but at the very beginning of the movie, when he's telling Conan as a child about the riddle of steel, it's a lesson that Conan takes to heart, and you see why his character never forgets it. And just the way that William Smith plays the part, I mean, you see where Conan got a lot of his strength from, because his father was clearly a strong individual, both physically as well as philosophically. And so it's a brief performance, but it's a good one. Also, the late great Max von Sydow as King Osric, I mean, he plays the part with such relish, that, I mean, you have an individual who is confined to his throne room, due to the politics of ruling a city, and also having to contend with the dark forces of Thulsa Doom. But when he realizes that this trio of inept thieves has hurt Thulsa Doom by stealing from him, you see him just be reinvigorated. And the way Max von Sydow plays it, it's just, you see this sort of dignified elderly king, indulging in, celebrating and laughing about something. And it's just, such a good portrayal. But there's also an emotional side to him, in the sense that he's, wanting his daughter to be safely returned to him. And there's a line of dialogue where, he's talking to all three of them, but he's focusing on Conan. And he says something along the lines of, "There comes a time, thief, when the jewels cease to sparkle, and the gold loses its luster, and the throne room becomes a prison, and all that remains is a father's love for his child." And that's where you see that there's a sadness to his character. I mean, you knew that he cared about his daughter, but that line of dialogue and the way Max von Sydow delivers it, it really sells the fact that this is a king who is helpless to save, the one person that he genuinely, loves. I mean, he cares about his kingdom, but he loves his daughter. And so yeah, it's a brief performance, but it's a wonderful one by Max von Sydow, and it definitely adds to the setting and the feeling of world building in this movie, because there's so many, good characters that you see on screen. And that's one of the things I like about this movie. I mean, Conan, as played by Schwarzenegger, is the focus of the movie, but he's surrounded by fascinating characters and memorable ones. And also, the witch, the shape-shifting witch, is very memorably played by Cassandra Gava. And much like William Smith and Max von Sydow, her part is a small one, but it's a very memorable one. And, the way she plays it, I mean, she's very erotic. I mean, very visually, sexy, right? And so, it's like eroticism mixed with horror, because there's the whole supernatural angle of her being a witch and what have you. And I thought it was a very brief but very good performance. It kind of goes hand in hand with, these other, bit part performances that we see throughout the movie. And also give me a sec. Valerie Quennessen, I think is how you say her name. She also died. She was 30-something when she died. It was a car accident. But she plays the princess, King Osric's daughter. And dialogue-wise, she doesn't have a whole lot to do. But physically, though, she does a really good job of, portraying someone who's enthralled to a cult leader. Like, she does a good job of playing someone who's, say, like, hypnotized and, even falling under the sway of, say, the serpent aspect of Thulsa Doom's cult, because there's a physicality that she brings to the role that at times is serpent-like, but then, when, say, her human side resurfaces, towards the end of the movie, there's kind of an eeriness to her character, but it's like, whereas she was enthralled to Thulsa Doom, when she's when she becomes closer to, say, Conan, towards the end of the movie, you get the idea just from her physicality, that she's someone who's, desperately casting out for, a savior. And so when Thulsa Doom's, true colors are revealed to her, it's like, she tries to latch on to Conan as this new savior, as it were. But Conan himself, I mean, he's not, trying to be a savior. He's just trying to avenge, the loss of his family. But it's an interesting portrayal, I thought, that, Valerie Quennessen did with the princess. Even though in terms of dialogue, she doesn't have a lot to say, but it's just physically, though, and knowing what you know about, Thulsa Doom and, the hypnotic sway that he has with his followers, I thought that her portrayal of the princess, did a good job of conveying, how, a cult can really distort someone's perception and affect who they are and, how they carry themselves and what have you. Let's see, what else was there? And there's also a brief, a little cameo by Ron Cobb, who was actually the production designer on this movie. But he plays this shop vendor who gives Subotai and Conan some helpful information about Thulsa Doom's cult and the tower that they dwell in this particular city. But Ron Cobb, though, you could tell he was having fun with the part, but the way he plays it, though, and the way he looks, like his wardrobe design and everything, he looks like a shopkeeper, but he plays the part perfectly and blends right in with everyone else. And so I thought that was actually pretty cool. But it's neat when you see like a production member of a movie actually getting to be on screen and not flubbing it, but yeah, so another thing about this movie I loved is the score by the late Palladorius. That name sounds familiar. He's also the gentleman who gave us the score for RoboCop and Starship Troopers and several other movies. But Conan the Barbarian was probably one of his most epic scores, in my opinion. I'm not a music expert or anything like that, but you think of an epic movie, like especially a fantasy epic. Do yourself a favor and listen to the soundtrack for Conan the Barbarian by Pascal Palladorius. It's just amazing. It's somber when it needs to be, it's sweeping when it needs to be, it's intense when it needs to be, and especially like say in the fight scenes and what have you. Just from listening to the music, you feel like you're in a battle. But another thing about the movie is that when it comes to the fight choreography, they did a wonderful job. So this is like all pre-CGI, but it's like the stunts, and the fight choreography and the sword play. Very well done, very well choreographed. It really looks like people are fighting each other, and you could definitely tell that Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sandahl, Bergman, and Gerry Lopez. You could tell that they went through some training, to sell the characters' fighting prowess, and so and also when it comes to the blood and gore, look out. It's pretty brutal, but not like say gratuitously so, but more like matter-of-factly so. Like you get hit with a sword, you're gonna get cut open and start bleeding to death, that kind of thing. Or you get you get shot with an arrow, you're probably not gonna be walking around anytime soon, things like that. But yeah, basically when people get hit with weapons in this movie, you see the after effect. They don't just walk it off. But yeah. Speaking of walking stuff off, though, the whole notion of Conan, going through being crucified by Thulsa Doom and his forces, and then surviving that. Is wondrous enough, but getting to where he's able to, mend physically to where he's able to, fight again. One of the things I give a shout out to is the fact that you get the idea that would not have been possible without sorcery. So even though this is another instance of sorcery being subdued in this movie, or magic being subdued on screen in this movie, it definitely has a powerful presence in this movie, though, in this world. So, some people in this setting, it's like they believe in the gods, but they don't want to draw their attention. And so, when their attention is drawn, wonderful things can happen, but so can terrifying things. But thankfully, in the case of Conan, that is something where, he's put through the ringer, but he's able to eventually walk away from it. But it also adds to the fact that he's just flesh and blood, but it took something supernatural to, help him regain his strength. And so, So I just thought that was interesting, kind of going hand in hand with, the violence, showing that, you know, you get hurt in this movie, you're not walking away, from it. But, very, very well done in the action department. But all in all, though, I just think that this was an excellent movie, and I also like the themes in this movie. It even opens up with a quote by Friedrich Nietzsche, I think is how you say his name. He's the guy who says, or he said, that which doesn't kill us makes us stronger, or something along those lines. And you definitely see that theme explored in this movie. And considering that this is, a movie set in the realm of fantasy, I thought that that was actually pretty neat to see explored in such a setting. But, I mean, you really see, Conan go through, like, having his, village wiped out, and then being put into slavery, and then being put in a gladiator arena, and then, being, made to find his way in the world and make his own destiny. I mean, you really see, that whole notion of, him being a self-made man and making his own destiny in the world. And, the stuff that didn't kill him definitely made him stronger. So it was pretty neat to see that explored on screen. But I'm going to go ahead and give Conan the Barbarian 5 out of 5 stars. This was an excellent movie. As, a fantasy movie, as well as just, a movie in general. This is a great movie, and definitely one of my, favorite fantasy flicks from the 80s. And so, if you want to, check out something in the realm of fantasy, like, say, an 80s fantasy movie, but I guess you could say has a more mature feel to it, I mean, Conan the Barbarian is definitely a great choice, but I'd also recommend John Boorman's Excalibur. In fact, I mean, you could probably make that a double feature night. I mean, that'd be pretty interesting to see. But so Conan the Barbarian, 5 out of 5 stars. And so to cover the special features real quick, you have a wonderful documentary called Conan Unchained, and it goes into a lot of detail as to, how the movie came to be, and there was a lot of people that are interviewed, like the actors, some production designers, like fight choreographers and what have you, and the writers and director. I mean, so you find out a lot of stuff, in this documentary. And of course, you could read a lot of it on IMDb and what have you, as far as like the factoids and what have you. But hearing a lot of this information from the people who were actually involved in making the movie, you really come to appreciate, the stories they have to tell. And you also have a commentary by the director, John Milius, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. And so I will say it's not the best commentary I've heard. It's kind of like, how you have, sometimes you're in school or you had the teacher who they're showing you a PowerPoint presentation, but they're literally pointing everything out to you. Like they're not trusting you to be smart enough to, put 2 and 2 together. And even though full well, what's on the PowerPoint presentation, the teacher's insisting on explaining everything to you on this one particular slide, even though you know everything about it already, or even though you already know the gist of it. So unfortunately, this particular commentary has that feel to it, at least in my opinion, because there's a lot of times where you're looking at something on screen while the commentary is going, and they're very obvious in their observations, and some of the time, you kind of feel like, I mean, they definitely have some stories to tell here and there, but it would have been nice if, I guess, the commentary had been more engaging, because, I mean, for example, I mean, if you listen to a commentary for, say, like, Clive Barker's Hellraiser or Ridley Scott's Legend, I mean, those are commentary tracks wherein you learn a lot about the movie just by listening to what the directors have to say or actors have to say. Whereas here, though, it's kind of like, they're talking about something that you're already looking at and that you've already learned about, but they're acting like it's something new, I guess. I'm not sure if I'm making any sense as far as this goes, but it's just, I mean, on one hand, it is cool that, you got the director of the movie and Arnold Schwarzenegger in the same room together to have this commentary track together, because the two of them actually are talking to each other. It's not recorded separately. But I just wish that they would have had more insight into, say, what was going on with the movie, and basically it would have made for a much better listen instead of, say, pointing out the obvious, which they tend to do a lot. So I mean, it's cool that this commentary track exists, but at the same time, I just wish that it would have been more informative. Like the documentary, the Conan Unchained documentary, that was informative. Okay, so I mean, if you're a fan of commentary tracks, I mean, definitely give it a listen. But if you're wanting to find out a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff, definitely check out the documentary Conan Unchained. So, you also have a couple of deleted scenes. Nothing much to write home about there. I will say that, there is one funny scene wherein Conan and Subotai, they come across this street vendor who's selling lizards on a stick, kind of like hot dog on a stick, that kind of thing, except it's lizards. And the vendor's played by the director. And so in the documentary, he actually talks about that scene, and he's like, on one hand, it was kind of fun to have a cameo in your own movie, but when I saw it in the dailies, I was kind of like, my God, I'm terrible. And so basically, I did what very few directors have done. I cut myself. Basically, he cut his part from the movie entirely. So the only remnant of it is a little bit where in the movie, when Conan and Subotai are exploring the city, you see them walking around with lizards on a stick, but you don't see where he got them from. It's just, hey, we picked these up from a stall, that kind of thing. So yeah, as far as deleted scenes go, nothing special there. I just thought that one bit was kind of funny for the story that was related to it. But you also have a featurette on the special effects and how some of the stuff was done there. And considering that this was pre CGI, it was pretty cool to see how they had to work with a lot of prosthetic stuff, like say with a giant snake, or the makeup effects for the witch woman and what have you, or Thulsa Doom shape-shifting at one point. So pretty cool to see. And then you got the Conan archives, and I don't remember what that one is. I'm a little rusty on that part, but you also have a theatrical trailer. But yeah, so all in all, though, you have an excellent movie with a good set of bonus features. So yeah, thanks for taking the time to check out my review. You got any questions, comments? Please drop a line, let me know. And if you like what you see here, feel free to like and subscribe. So y'all have a good night. Take care. Bye.